Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious about what this is or you have got a bit lost. Welcome, everyone. I'm Chatty. This is my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter, and I'm going to be chatting away madly to you about the rest of the books that I read in April. So I'll be going through the second part of April, so kind of roughly weeks 3 and 4. I'm also going to talk about the books that I'm currently reading, and I'm going to go through some of the readathons that I was taking part in. So I have a few picture books to kind of talk about, sort of for picture this, but I wasn't specifically following the prompts, but I always like to read some picture books, and I have the picture books are trans books for Transgirl April. So I'm going to be talking to you about my Transgirl April TBR, and I'm going to be talking to you about my magical readathon TBR. So grab yourself a drink if you haven't got one, and enjoy. Now on this channel, I do not edit my long videos. I only have the power of pause. So cheers everyone. Clink, 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 clink. It is one shot and there is no editing. I don't know what the chaos will be. Hopefully I can be succinct, but we will find out. Just like that. In the description box, I have a list of all the books that I talk about. So if you want to find out more information on them, check them for trigger warnings, get a better synopsis, get other people's opinions, you can click the links and find out so much more. Any of the readathons are also going to be in the description as well. So you can find out more about the readathons that I took part in. And you can find out about any other content creators that I mention. I will put their links in there too. I also include timestamps in my videos as well. So if there are certain books that you are interested in and you just want to go ahead and find those, please use those timestamps. If I am doing any spoilers, I'm currently not sure what I'm going to say as of now, so we will see. But if I do any spoilers, I will warn you that I'm about to do a spoiler, and there will be a timestamp so you can do the non-spoiler bit if you don't want to be spoiled, or if you're just interested in the book and don't really care because you're not, going to read it and you're happy to be spoiled, then listen away. Okay, I think that's the whiffly waffly part done. So I'm going to talk to you first about the readathons to start off with. So I'm going to begin with the magical readathon. So this is a readathon created by G from Book Roast, and it kind of basically is like you're in a magical university and the prompts link to different classes that you want to do to further your magical career. So my character is Piola's Sirlope, and he is a little bit of an academic. He likes learning and studying. Chilled out a little bit more now in his second year. He's got a friendship group. He's got kind of wider extracurricular stuff that he's interested in doing, and is less needing to read everything, which has helped me a lot. So Piola's is studying for Star Whisperer and Scribe because he still can't decide, and he likes to take an alchemy class as well, just because. So for the Star Whisperer, I needed to study the Art of Illusion, and that was to read a book with either the word game or play in the title. And we're off to a great start because I read neither of these. So the one I was thinking about reading was Game Changer by Neil Shusterman. However, I suddenly felt like I just really need to finish off reading the Arc of the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. I read Thunderhead in March and just wanted to carry on. So the first book I read in April was The Toll, and I finished off the Arc of the Scythe. And I felt I just kind of want to sit with that Shusterman for now. I don't want to dive into like another Shusterman dystopia. So I don't quite feel like reading this one yet. I'll kind of just put it on the back burner. The book I originally wanted to read was Game Changer by Juno Dawson, but I reserved it at the library, but I didn't, there wasn't a copy available. But now my copy came in and is available, so I may just end up reading Gender Games for that prompt instead of Game Changer. We'll see how I'm feeling, but I'm really excited to read Gender Games because I love Juno Dawson. I think she's fantastic. And I was just kind of reading the introduction to this and the list of chapters in here, and already I'm so excited. Let me tell you a few of the chapter titles and you may see why. So we have things like Chapter 6, Won't Someone Think of the Children? Chapter 9, Spice Up Your Life, of course. Chapter 10, The Great Escape. Chapter 15, Gaydar and Grinder. chapter 18, Transplaining, and chapter 27, Turf Wars. The Kids Aren't Alright, Puberty 2, The Future. I'm just excited to read Juno Dawson's story as she talks about her own journey, but also about gender in general as well, and kind of having more of a look at that and kind of how it shapes society and difficulties. The blurb, it says, gender isn't just screwing over trans people, it's messing with everyone. From little girls who think they can't be doctors to teenagers who come to expect street harassment, from exclusionist feminists to alt-right young men, from men who can't cry to women who think they shouldn't. So I'm really excited to read this. So I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but I have not. So the first prompt, Art of Illusion, I have not passed. So I need to do that before August. So we will see what happens there. I did read my book for astronomy. So this was to read a book recommended for your zodiac sign. I am a Gemini, and I kind of made my own recommendation because I couldn't find one that fitted, that I was interested in reading and hadn't already read. So I went with He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chang, which is the second book in the Radiant Empire duology, because I'd read She Who Became the Sun, and in She Who Became the Sun there is definitely kind of like a two sides. So there is two sides to a war, there is two sides to the book, there's like two different characters you're following and the kind of their different viewpoints about different things. There is kind of like a back and forth kind of with the gender binary thing. So I felt it fitted the two situation of the Gemini. He Who Drowned the World, it gets a bit more complex and mingly. There's more characters, the more different things we're kind of looking at. It's less binary, which was very exciting and enjoyable. Possibly didn't fit the category anymore, but I went in expecting it to. So I went in with really good intentions. Anyway, I read it. And so I have passed astronomy. So I've got 1 towards my Star Whisperer. I then needed to read for Inscription. You picked a book. So you wrote 3 books down on a bit of paper and picked one. And the book I pulled out was I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shira. I speak about this in my April week 1 and 2 wrap up, which is here should you wish to look at it. So 2 books for Star Whisper so far. Psionics and Divination, you need to do a bingo prediction. So pick a book for your bingo prediction. Draw a bingo board. It could be like 3x3, 4x4, 5x5. I went for a 3x3. I was originally going for A Tempest of Tea by Hasafa Faisal. Very excited to read this, but I'm reading it with it's a buddy read with my 2 people who I do lots of my lovely fairy loot reads with, which is Chloe from Phantom of the Pages and Vidania from Vidania Silverscribe. And we kind of had another book that we were finishing on, and I'm absolutely to blame. I hadn't picked it up and continued, so there was lots of kind of stalling and waiting. So this one did not get picked up in April, so I chose a different book instead to do my prediction ones from. And that book is Sisters of the Lost Marsh by Lucy Strange. And I did very well on the bingo. I got 8 out of 9 on my bingo. Possibly because I did very vague guesses for the bingo board, maybe. So a lot of my predictions were true. If you don't want spoilers for Sisters of the Lost March, I'm going to do some very mild spoilers to tell you about my bingo check-in. So feel free to go along until I've flopped the book down. So the ones I had was Gloomy Landscape, A Ghost Story or Legend, sisters that possibly their personalities clash or there's like a fight between the sisters, a sad or grumpy father, a warm pub or an inn, sisters supporting each other, an eerie figure, sisters banding together against a common outsider, and a description of cold. So 8 of those 9 predictions came true for this. So yeah, I think they were quite vague, but never mind. It was all very good, and I had a fun time doing that. Okay, so that was my 4-star Whisperer prompt. There is also law, but that's just rereading like the law inscription. You don't really get points on pages logged for that one. So I have passed all 5 of my subjects, and well, no, I have passed 4 of my subjects. I've still got the Art of Illusion Game Changer Play 1 to do. Moving on to Scribe, 2 of so inscription and law was also needed for Scribe. So tick tick. The other 3 was spells and incantation. For that, I needed to read a book with a certain number of letters, and the one I pulled out was 10. I needed to read a book with 10 letters in the title, and I chose Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. I read this one, so I have passed my spells and incantation. For restoration, I needed to read a book that would cure book slumps. And for that, I read Pages & Co. by Anna James, Tilly and the Book Wanderers, which is the first in the series. So I have passed restoration. I also speak about that book in my weeks 1 and 2 wrap up. And the final one is Elemental Studies, and that was to read a book with a source of light on the cover. And for that, I read another middle grade, Wilder Than Midnight. And as you can see on here, there is a window that has light shining out of it. So I counted that. There is also a moon in the sky on the back and stars, which are sources of light too. As a backup, I also had this thin little World Book Day book on Onyeka and the Secret Superhero. And there is a huge sun here across the book. So that would have counted too if I hadn't got to Wilder Than Midnight. And my final book was my alchemy book, and for that you had to read a book with circles on the cover, and I chose the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson, and there are lots of little circles here from the beams of light coming down, and also you've got lots of worlds kind of in the background which are circles, so lots and lots of circles on this one. And I haven't finished reading it yet. This was one I'd managed to read the first couple of chapters in April, but definitely hadn't finished by the end of April. So this one was not logged for points, and I'm still currently reading. I am just over halfway now in May for reading this one. So this is one of the books that I'm currently reading. And so I've got my astronomy class to finish and my art of illusion class to finish. So pretty good, actually, on the whole for the magical readathon. I thought I had less. I thought I'd done less, but actually just the 2 classes to catch up before August. So that's brilliant. Okay, I'm going to have some tea and move on to the Transgirl April. So for Transgirl April, I really wanted to make sure I read a variety, and I had 3 focus books. So my 3 focus books, I wanted to read one book by a trans man, one book by a trans woman, and one book by a non-binary author. And I wanted to make sure I had a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. So for my non-binary author, I had Shelley Parker Chan, and I read He Who Drowned the World, which is a fiction. So fantasy, historical fiction for that one. I wanted to read an autobiography, and I really wanted to read Uncomfortable Labels by Laura Kate Dale. So this was my trans woman memoir book. And then I wanted to read more of kind of like sort of like more of a essay kind of exploration into gender and kind of an exploration of that. So I have They, She, He, or He, She, They by Shyla Baylor. How we talk about gender and why it matters. So this is part memoir, part sort of like essays exploring this. And I read a little bit managed to read a little bit at the end of April, but I was feeling burnt out by quite a lot of reading quite a lot of non-fiction. So I was kind of definitely in a middle grade kick and definitely wanted to read middle grades. So once I finished my middle grades, I felt really back to go back into non-fiction, but there was only a small amount of April left, so I only read the introduction and the first couple of chapters of this. So I'm continuing this into May, and I have currently got up to chapter 6. So excited to continue reading with this one. Okay. So those are my focus books, but I did read others. I had a book that I have done in my February wrap up, and I actually finished it. I read most of it in February, but again, I was feeling a little bit burnt out, so I read then a little bit in March, and then I had like the last chapter to finish off in April. So I did finish that one off in April. That was Black on Both Sides by C. Riley Snorton. I then had a few other ones that I did. I spoke about. Oh, come here. I spoke about some picture books in my weeks one, yeah, weeks 1 and 2 of April. Sorry, I don't know where the words have gone. So I spoke about understanding transgender, which wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was well-meaning, but it missed the mark on a couple of things. So if you're interested, go and have a look at that one. I've already mentioned before, I read I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shira. Really loved this. And I've already spoken about the uncomfortable labels. So I didn't manage to read Pet by Onyeka Emezi, which I really wanted to. And I didn't manage to read the Transmuted Journal number 2 called Transgender is Immortal, but I will be reading these throughout the year, so they will get read. I'm also currently reading She, He, They, Them, Understanding Gender Identity, which is sort of middle grade, sort of early young adult non-fiction. It's a what's the word? It's in the children's section in the reference book. It's not a picture book, but it's kind of that kind of thinness level. But I'm gonna continue reading this one. I'm just kind of pacing myself with the non-fiction. I just needed a little bit more fiction in there as well. So that's in my currently reading pile. And then I have 2 picture books to talk about. So this kind of links into picture this. So Gender Heroes, I spoke a little bit about in my previous one. I'd read half of it. I read the other half in the second half of April. I was kind of enjoying just taking my time and reading a couple of pages out of this every other day. So Gender Heroes has lots of transgender activists, authors, celebrities, athletes, business people, all sorts of different people, and it's just kind of showing the amazing things that people in the transgender community have been able to do and achieve. So it's very inspiring. And the art style is very bold. There are illustrations of all the different trans people. So you've got very kind of bold pictures with lots of different colour blocks. Skin tone is just gone kind of multicolored. It's not done in skin tone colours. We've just got greens and blues used for skin tone, adding to kind of the brightness of this. I was very interested in, this is kind of like a great starting point to find out more people to learn more about. So there were some people that I recognised in here and some people that I'd never heard of before, and it's definitely whetted my appetite to find out more about them. So one of them I'm going to mention here is because this is obviously coming out in May, which is the Spoonies Readathon. So we have a little bit of I want to say cross purpose, but that is not what I mean. Crossover. Readathon crossover. There we go. So we have Erin Rose Phillip. She is fashion. She's in the fashion world, and she made fashion history as the first Black, transgender, and physically disabled person to be signed by a major modelling agency. So I definitely kind of want to find out a lot more about her. She has cerebral palsy. She's also like an activist. So I definitely want to look into this person. I think that would work really well for Spoonies Readathon, which is all about promoting people with disabilities and authors and protagonists having disabilities in books. So yeah, really enjoyed Gender Heroes. It's a great kind of stepping stone to delving more into different transgender people. I also have this picture book. It's a sort of metaphorical story. It's called The Boy Who Wanted to Be a Deer. So it's all about this boy who is kind of hiding what he wants to do in life because it's deemed as wrong, and he doesn't want to upset the people around him. So when he puts his dream on hold and follows someone else's dream, He makes everyone proud and happy apart from him. So it's kind of exploring like making choices for yourself and not for other people, through the metaphor of being a deer. And the artwork in here is beautiful. It's I think they use a lot of watercolors in here, and the use of color is lovely. So here we go. We've got this like celebrational pose on top of this mountain. So we've got all these lovely greens, and right at the top of the mountain, we've got this like beautiful kind of light, and we've got this glow of different pinks, oranges and yellows. And then the glow kind of goes out into the sky with blues, and we've got purpley clouds. And that is contrasted on the next page, where the success was not necessarily for our protagonist in here called Tommy, because he didn't get to live his dream. And he's just been doing things for everyone else and has found no satisfaction in it. So it's all very grey. He's in the snow. We've got his back to us. And it's all very kind of subdued colour to kind of go with that emotion. So the illustrations in here are really beautiful. And they're very kind of evocative of those. It really kind of helps with the emotion of the story. I really like this one here of this eye. And then you've got this deer reflected in the eye. I think it's really, really cool. So this is a really lovely read, and I just love the artwork in here. Okay, so that was everything that I have for Transgender April. So I'm now going to focus in a lot more on the books that I read and kind of giving you a little bit more about them. So I'm going to be talking about Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett, Sisters of the Lost Marsh by Lucy Strange, Wild of the Midnight by Kerry Burnell, Onyeka and the Secret Superhero by Tola Okaguru, and He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. But first, I'm going to have some more tea. So Feet of Clay was a reread for me. I love Terry Pratchett. I've read pretty much most of his books. There's still a few that I haven't read yet. And there were also some that I have completely forgotten because I read them as a teenager. This is my mum's copy. It's a mass market paperback. I don't usually enjoy the Josh Kirby illustrations on here because it just doesn't, the way the characters are presented is not the way I have the characters in my head. But a lot of people have a huge affection for these because these are, you know, Josh Kirby was the illustrator for Pratchett for such a long time. So it really brings up kind of the Pratchett world for a lot of people. I much prefer Paul Kidby's illustrations, but definitely having this to hand and having this around just made me really appreciate. I do really just love having a paperback because it can just be chucked in anywhere and come with you, and it's just really easy to hold in your hand. So it was a fun reading experience from this book. I love Feet of Clay. I have not read this. I've read it quite recently, but not terribly recently. I've read the first two Guards and Men at Arms so many times because I have a copy. I took them with me to uni. Those are the ones I own. The rest belongs to mum, and I just get them whenever I see her, basically, and I kind of pop one back and take another one out. I could find them in the library, but I haven't done. Anyway, it was such a nice treat to reread a Pratchett and to just kind of pick it up and not feel that I've got to read them in any order. I was just like, I haven't read Feet of Clay for ages. I'm just going to dive straight into that one. So Feet of Clay is one of the Watch series books. So it's like this police force in the city. And what I love about this series is it really does explore a lot of racism, basically. It explores people's views of differences. You have trolls, you have dwarves, you have the undead. And we are introduced to these creatures called golems. Now, golems, all of those living and undead races come together because golems are not seen as alive because they are made of pot. So these are living, walking pots that have no words, and they have a written scroll in their head called the Chem, and that's what gives them their life force, their morals, their instructions. They have like fire eyes that are gleaming, and they communicate by writing things on their slate. So again, it has quite a nice crossover into the Spoonies Readathon as well, because you're looking at kind of the way society views you and thinks of you because of your ability or your disability. So I just love all of those themes that are explored in Pratchett's work, and how you have characters in here that we love, that we know, and they are overcoming their prejudice in this. Like, they have prejudice and they are aware of that, and they speak of it, and they come through and kind of make decisions like, I am wrong, I have been mistaken. And it's the thing that I love exploring the most in books is who is valuable, like what is worth. Do we all have the same playing field? Do we measure worth in different ways? How do we look at things? What do our own prejudice say about us? And I love how all of that's explained in here. Obviously, there is a mystery in here. There is a poisoning that they are trying to get to the bottom of. We are introduced to alchemy in this one, using that in the Watched. So we're starting to look at pulling things apart and kind of policing in a slightly different way to what they're used to policing in here. And we have that kind of reflection of the old days of when everything was much simpler, and the new days where there's a lot more kind of like paperwork and other things. So you've got those two sides kind of happening, and you've got your stock of characters and the way they kind of bounce off each other and kind of add different things in here. And we also have the inclusion in here of Cheery, who is a dwarf. And through Cheery, and dwarfs in this world are all male. They all have beards, but we find out that not all of them are male. But everyone is presumed to be male, and no one suggests they are female. So there is a really interesting look at gender in Feet of Clay as well, which was a lot of fun. And having not read it within the last few years, and having gone on my own journey exploring, gender and what that kind of means in society, I had a very kind of different viewpoint when coming back and looking at this. So this was great. I loved my time with Pratchett. Okay, I'm now going to talk about the first of 3 middle grades. So this is Sisters of the Lost March by Lucy Strange. I am going to do a link here. There is an interview that Gavin, previously How to Train Your Gavin, now Gavin Reads It All, did with Lucy Strange in his Conversation with Authors. She's incredible. I immediately loved her as soon as I saw her talking. I waited until I read this before going and looking. Also, I will be linking Jack's video. She does a single review of this book, and I love the way that Jack talks about this and explores it, so do go and check that out as well, and I will put a link here. I've been wanting to read this for a really long time. I think the cover just absolutely pulls you in. It's got lots of pale greens, pale pinks, and there's like goldy colours mixed in with it as well. I love the girls, the 3 sisters here, all holding hands. And we have a circusy tent up on here, and a moon and some trees and this kind of green hill. And it feels marshy in its pea greeny colour, with lots of kind of swirls of wind around. And we have this lantern on the back here. So in this book, you have a farm, you have these sisters, there is a father, there is a grandmother. And it's these sisters kind of continuing to go along with the farm, but there has been a decision that has made. The father has decided that he is marrying off the eldest daughter, and it's not something anyone else in the family is happy about. The father is incredibly superstitious, and there is a rhyme about sisters that he believes needs to be fulfilled or they will be cursed. This family is gorgeous, father aside, and I just love the different personalities of the sisters and how they all kind of mesh together. I adore the youngest sister, whose name is currently eluding me at the moment. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten her name. I really love the protagonist in here. So we follow the 3rd sister, whose name I've also forgotten, Willa. So you are seeing the life through their eyes, what it's like in this place. It does very much have this kind of historical feeling to it. There's not a set time, but it's definitely in a time where women's education wasn't thought much of. Witches, the words were kind of like thrown around as something to be scared of. There's this spooky ghosts and spirits are kind of given what's the word? They believe in them, basically. So it's set beside this marsh, and there's these legends of the Will-o'-the-Wisp and these two sisters that went to go and defeat this like sort of the Marsh king, and what all came of that. And one day one of the sisters is gone missing, and that kind of upsets the family. Things change, and Willa kind of sets off to go and find her. So I just love the family dynamic in here. I love the adventure-y feel we have to this. Lots of different aspects of the story all kind of pulled together. There is a definite spooky feeling, and the atmosphere in here is incredible. But at the heart of this is this family of sisters and a grandma, and there is just this love of stories in here, but stories and writing, women being able to read and women being able to write is not allowed in this society, so they have to hide it. And it's just beautiful the way all of this happens. I just really loved the writing. I loved the characters. They're really strong. I loved how the story unfolded. You get some family history within here. So there's like family mysteries. There's the mystery of the Marsh. There's the mystery of the missing sister. And all of it kind of is pulled together. And I absolutely cannot wait to read more of Lucy Strange's books because I loved her storytelling. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what other ones she has. My second middle grade is what I've been trying to read for ages, and I think again I was just waiting for that moment where I could just sit and really enjoy it. And this is Wilder Than Midnight by Kerry Burnell. Now this book has a very fairy tale inspiration and feel to it, so there are lots of aspects from like some of our well-known fairy tales, and they were all kind of pulled together. But the story that we are following is very unique, and it just has, you just see glimpses of those different ones. So I personally found it a lot of fun to clock certain references. I found that really enjoyable, but you don't need to be very well versed in fairy tales to be able to enjoy this. But it definitely has that vibe of magic and the woods and mysteries and adventure, and people setting off to take charge of their own destiny, and the idea of fate, and the idea of missing, sort of like lost heirs and missing parents, and where did you come from, and who is your family, all of those things. And it all kind of like, most of the action takes place in these woods, and then you have like the village and the castle like outside. And you follow three girls. So our main protagonist is Wild Rose. She is pictured here in the middle in this red cloak, with the wolf in front of her. She is of the forest. She lives in the forest, and she is missing her arm from sort of around, sort of just underneath the elbow. And it is own voices because Kerry Burnell also is missing the same part of her arm. So when there were moments talking about Wild Rose, because she is so active and agile, and how she describes doing things, and she will mention, let me use her words. Wild Rose and Sappy walked to the end of the garden, hand in hand. Wild Rose reached out with the crook of her elbow and untethered the little grey horse. So occasionally the Wild Rose is mentioned using the crook of her elbow or her hand and how she does things, but it's just briefly mentioned and then carries on. Like, it's very much like Wild Rose is Wild Rose. Wild Rose is not someone with a disability. It's just part of the story. And what the story does beautifully is it kind of shows this whole range of different characters and how the certain people in society, again, perceive certain things, and how certain things people are looked down on. And it just has, again, this found family, the strength and courage of these three brave girls in here, all with different stories, but all with a part to play in this adventure. And all these little things that kind of happen weave together in this kind of plan for the end, of which I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to spoil it. But it's just I think the strength and the courage and the friendship is one of the highlights of this book, as is the found family aspect, and as is the true meaning of family. So I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the fairy tale feel to it as well, like the way the story is structured. So it touches on events that kind of happened possibly like 10 years earlier in the story that are kind of integral to the main story. But the way it's kind of told, so there's 3 parts to this book, and the beginning of each part is kind of like a little story. So like the first line of this is at the edge of a fathomless forest in a castle grey as cloud, a baby was born at the stroke of midnight. And then there's another one, and it's again at the wherever it was, a baby was born, and it's the same kind of like storytelling vibe. I really enjoyed kind of like going back and comparing the two ever so slightly and starting to think about, what does that mean? What does that mean? So I thought that was really well done. The way the story ended was beautiful, kind of tying it all off, but there is enough kind of like intrigue and magical kind of folklore to go, what happens next? And there is a second book called Swifter Than Starlight, and it focuses on 3 new characters, but you hear of these old characters, and I think they do come across them in the next one. So it's again set in this world. I feel we'll have slightly different fairy tale inspirations in there. But again, I'm looking forward to reading about 3 really strong characters and a friendship group and overcoming adversity and just again that strength of character prevailing. So really, really enjoyed this one, and I am going to give a small spoiler because there was something that I really appreciated in this. Okay, so small spoiler for Wild in the Midnight. If you don't want to hear the spoiler, toddle off to the next book. So within this, there is a lot about family and kind of different meanings and different things about family. There is also the kind of aspect of royalty and the status that royalty is given. But what I liked in this story that is different to kind of other stories, when you have this idea of like, the lost heir, and then becoming the princess or the king or the empress, like whatever it is you want to be, the ruler of the world that you were taken from as a child, and then you step into it. I love that the protagonist in here is able to go, that's not for me, that's not my world. That was taken from me, but I don't want it. That's not where I belong. Where I belong is here. And those people might have given birth to me, but the people who raised me, that's my family. And I loved that take on it. I loved the way that was done because I thought it just really appreciated what's the most important thing. The most important thing is people who care for you and where you feel at home, not this kind of concept of status. So I really appreciated that. Okay, I'm going to talk about the next book now. Whoop. So the final middle grade book I have to talk about is Onyeka and the Secret Superhero. So this is a little tiny book. I think it's only 85 pages long, and it is from published for World Book Day. So World Book Day is in the UK. We have about 8 or 10 or different titles of books. There's always like a couple of picture books and then some sort of more chapter books, and there's always some sort of like non-fiction and things. And so you all the children across like schools and nurseries get given a voucher, and you can go and swap it for one of these free books that have been produced, or you get £1 off a different book. I always love collecting ones where they're part of a series. So I have got a Strange Worlds Travel Agency one, I've got a Percy Jackson one, just because I know the series that I'm interested in. I've got How to Train Your Dragon one. So I've always tried to get hold of them when I feel it's a fantasy series that I'm going to enjoy. So Onyeka, I've loved books 1 and 2 in this series, so I was very keen to kind of pick up and read about this one. So I also have book 3 under my bed, but I think this one occurs just before book 3. So it starts as where book 2 had started, and I think it's just like a little mini adventure. There's a situation, and Onyeka and her friends need to go and deal with the situation. So it's just a fun adventure, exploring all of that. And from the way it ended, I'm hoping there's certain things that we're then going to get in the next book. But I'm going to be intrigued to see how that all works, because not everyone will have been able to have read this. So I'm intrigued to see how that looks in the 3rd book. But it was so nice to hang out with these characters again, to be with Onyeka, to be back in this world, and it's made me really hyped to read the third book. And I was just looking up, oh, it's even less than it. It's 62 pages, so very, very tiny little book, this one, but I just enjoyed it. So finally, whoop, on the floor, come back. The final book I have to talk about is He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. So this is the final part of the duology, the Radiant Empire duology. So this book, again, absolutely loved it. And I'm going to say stuff without spoiling it, and we'll see if I need to move on to spoilers or not. So it picks up where the second book ended. It takes the characters that we had alive at the end of that one and continues with where the story is. So it's kind of like the next step. It very much felt like She Who Became the Sun was phase one of this shift in power and following some of our characters. So you have our protagonist, who's our main one, but you do also follow another character and their very different journey. And both of those characters kind of reach the end of those particular journeys in She Who Became the Sun, and they have kind of like a new challenge for them to be dealing with, like the next part of what they need in He Who Drowned the World. But you also get some more characters in here. We get to see a lot more of the court, and we get to continue on with the plans, and we have some more character crossovers. I was very intrigued to see where it was all going to go after She Who Became the Sun. I was quite scared as well, because it is very much Game of Thrones. If you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die ruthless mentality. So I love Zoo. She's wonderful. She's sort of a book baby, although she's much more talented than I could ever be. But she's still my book baby, and I'm feeling quite protective of her, and I'm worried for decisions she might feel she needs to make to get where she wants to be. And I'm worried about her and how that might change her, and I'm worried about how it might change relationships she has in the previous book. So I did go in here like slightly apprehensive about everything. But how all of it came together and how the themes that were set up in She Who Became the Sun really played out in He Who Drowned the World, I loved. So again, I've already mentioned, I really love this theme of who is valued. What are you worth? What is worthwhile? And that kind of concept. And that is definitely explored in this book about what it means to be a man. So in society, manhood is revered for being honourable, physically strong, respected and admired. And it is, I'm doing inverted commas a lot here, but man. Deemed only a man could do that. And there are certain people who view this is a man, but this is not a man. And it's just that exploration of what makes a man I found very interesting in here. And again, it's that, who has the right to be respected and admired? Should it be on physical prowess, on successes in warfare and the battlefield, or are there other skills and attributes that are just as valuable and if not more worthwhile? And that is all the stuff that I love being explored in here. I also loved exploring the theme of, is all the sacrifice you make for your end goal worth it? Is the payoff from reaching it worth everything you had to lose to get there? And I thought that was beautifully explored in here as well. So those themes and the way they were dealt with and the way that Shelley Parker Chan just pulls it all together, I just loved. There was also a lot of plot. There were some more emotional moments in here. Zoo has to think about certain things and certain consequences, and I just loved it. I just really loved it, and I just think this is a duology that deserves to be shouted about a lot more. So much so that I filmed a video that I will link here called Are You Sleeping on This Duology, where I just briefly talk about who I feel would appreciate this duology, because I don't think it's been marketed at the right people. So this is my final book. Okay, that is everything that I read in April. Actually, that's a lie. I did read another book, but I can't talk about it because it is one of the St Martin's Press books. So I am part of the St Martin's Press boycott. I will not be talking about that book, but there was one other book I read. I just can't tell you my thoughts on it. So that's a shame, isn't it, St Martin's Press? Yes, it is. If you're not sure what the St Martin's Press boycott is, I will leave a link here to the video by Sam, Expert Book Smuggler, which will give you a lot more information on it, and there will also be information in the description as well. So that is everything that I read in April. I had an amazing reading month. I really love being part of Transgirl April. I always enjoy seeing all the picture book content from Picture This. Didn't quite manage to get into finding the prompts and things, but I still thoroughly intend to do a deep dive into author and illustrator. Still on the plan. Who knows when I end up doing it, but I'd like to do that this year because I intended to do it last year and failed. I always enjoy being part of the Magical Readathon. That gives me a lot of joy as well. So it was a good month. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. Please do share any thoughts you have on anything that I've spoken about, on any of the readathons, on any of the books I've talked of. If you have any recommendations for other brilliant books by trans authors, I would love to hear them. And also any of the themes that I've spoken about and anything you feel that I might enjoy, please let me know. And let me know what book you enjoyed reading the most in April, because you know I love a chat. Happy reading, everyone.